13 to order. With that,
Attention, illegal board member on the board. Tiffany Schweitzer, your term expired June 30th, 2013. You have served an
you're out-
eight-year limit.
you're out of
According to the rules from Governor John Kinshower, and specifically
Which
states
out.
most terms are between 2 and 4 years,
Out.
and
Out.
all
You're out.
board and commission
You're-
members are subject to a two-term limit. Why is
Thank
Ms.
you.
Schweitzer allowed to serve more than 2 terms?
tell you what, Lane, when we're done, we will give you a little education on how the appointment process works at the
I
state
got
level.
it directly from the governor, so why are you not following the rules? Why are you? why
We
you
are
breaking
following the rules, Lane. Please, you're out of order. If I could ask you to please sit down or leave the room.
Nice.
Please.
The rules state right here from the governor.
You've
that
made your
it's-
point. You've made your point. Are you done?
Why is
you've
Ms.
made your
Schweitzer
point.
still on the board then? Why is she
She-
still allowed?
she is-
After being appointed on November 22nd, 2004, she's now been on the board for 8.5 years. No, because this is a board meeting that we have an invalid.
Lane, you're out of order.
On the board right now.
So we're going to start with the general manager's report.
A meeting with an invalid board member. We are not allowed to do that.
Why don't you just start?
Fine.
Mr. General Manager, you want to give us your general manager's report?
Board President Warner, members of the board, good morning.
Good morning.
I do want to start, first of all, with an update on last week's assault on our operator.
Thank
I know all of you are concerned about that, as I am. He remains at home healing. The assailant remains at large, but police are continuing to search for him and have a very good description and leads, so we feel confident that we'll find the individual. We also have a $1,000 reward out for his arrest. As you know, the attacker was identified as a resident at one of the camps along the I-205 right-of-way. Those camps spring up regularly. Yesterday, I met with our partners in the mayor at the invitation of the mayor at his office to meet with actually staff from the city, from ODOT, from the police bureau, and we talked about the seriousness of this issue and everybody's concern with it. I was frankly surprised, I would say maybe the word is shocked, to find that ODOT removes camps from the right-of-way within this region 5 to 10 times a week. It is a regular occurrence within the right-of-way. But everybody agreed with my basic opening remark, which is what we're doing right now isn't working and we have to change it up. So we agreed on a series of steps, but I would also caution there are no quick solutions to this. We have posted security guards at the 2 rest areas that we've had these incidents at, and they will remain for the duration. We've also increased the patrols from our Transit Police Division of this area and a surveillance of this area. So we agreed to 5 essential important steps, identified a lead on each of those steps. Very briefly, I can go through those. First of all, better link these camps and the residents with social services, and the mayor's office is going to take a lead at that. And that will be a continuing effort with community-based organizations as well as Multnomah County. And actually, there are, if you will, patrols and efforts by community-based organizations such as Join to work with the residents of the camps in that area as we speak, but we recognize the need to step that up. ODOT will take the lead in looking more critically at the right-of-way to see if there are right-of-way treatments such as removing underbrush. In some areas we've done hardscaping where there's actually now rocks instead of ground. The mayor had suggested some efforts by the Office of Neighborhood Involvement where perhaps some community gardens or other things to create a long-term issue where other people own the right-of-way rather than the homeless camps could be part of the solution. We'll be looking at that. One of the difficult things is reviewing the protocols that ODOT has agreed to under a settlement agreement some years back when they were sued related to this removal of camps. And those protocols right now require ODOT to post 10 days in advance before there's camp removal, retrieval of belongings, there are a number of other parts of that. But it's pretty clear to us that the current protocols aren't really working when there are public safety issues associated with the camp locations. So there will be an attempt to look at those again and see if there's any way that we can make those more effective, but also to look at the authorities that TriMet may have, that the state may have under other regulations that the city may have, and see if there's ways to enhance the sort of enforcement capability of the agencies in those areas. We also will be looking with our friends at the Police Bureau and with ODOT about our exclusion authorities. ODOT has exclusion authorities from their right-of-way. We have exclusion authorities. The city has certain authorities, and we're looking to see if we can better manage that and make that less seams in that because of the different ownerships of the right-of-way along the line. So we have a number of constructive steps we have underway. Those are all long-term steps. I think everybody at that meeting agreed that what we're seeing is not a one-season blip, that this is an ongoing problem that we really do need to get a hold of and do better with over a period of time. So we'll be talking, obviously, to the community and a lot of other stakeholders along the way. I use the notion that our riders and our operators are essentially should be seen as indicator species, right? So that if they're feeling unsafe in this environment, then what do you think the neighbors, what do you think the business people are feeling? So we do have to get on top of this as a community. And I just wanted to assure you that TriMet will be very, very active participant and looking for those solutions. But they are not ours alone. And again, just to note, we are posting security officers at the layover spots at both of those locations during service hours. So I'll obviously bring you many more updates on this as the recommendations develop further. But I'm happy to answer any questions you might have at this point.
Questions? Yes. Nice.
Has in regards to motive, have the authorities or anybody doing the investigation, have they given any idea as to the motive of these types of attacks?
It's interesting that in both these cases they were around restrooms. So there is that sort of basic human need that seems to be motivating some action. But the violent response is what is really difficult to, I think, understand the motive of. So I don't know, and we'll have the opportunity for Harry to come up a little later, if you'd like, to perhaps address if there's any speculation on the part of the officers.
Okay.
Neil, just you started out, I was a bit distracted, but can you give us the condition of the driver?
He's recovering fine. Fortunately, the wounds were not deep or life-threatening in any way, but they were superficial and very painful, and probably because it's that first layer that creates a lot of blood, so it was probably certainly very traumatic. We know that the operator continues to be, if you will, traumatized by the incident, as you would expect. And I would also say that this is a very sensitive issue for all of our operators who are, facing this uncertain environment. Harry did uncover for us all the, if you will, the assaults and the issues that operators have had for a number of years, and it's interesting, they are not, in terms of total numbers, actually spiking or changing very much. But nonetheless, these high-profile incidents create a great deal of concern on our part as well as our employees. No question.
Thanks.
Any questions? Good.
We're posting additional security at the two sites where there have been a problem. Do we have other layover sites where we know that there are homeless camps nearby where we might not have had a problem yet?
It's a really good question, and to my knowledge, we're not generally doing this at every layover site.
Right.
There are 79 bus lines, and
Right.
a lot of those may use similar layover sites. There's not quite that many layover sites, but there's a lot. And I think one of the things that we do respond to if there's any incidents, and then we do that. I haven't asked the specific question about adjacency to the right-of-way.
Well, and I'm just wondering, actually, I kind of feel like we need to do an assessment of all of our layover sites, a kind of a risk assessment. And if there are other sites that have similar kind of conditions that create that potential, that we might want to look at
Right,
A
and
little more
actually,
security there.
I appreciate that, because there actually has been an ongoing review since the first incident of all the layover sites and all the facilities related to both. So are there fencing alternatives, are there better lighting alternatives, are there other security precautions we need to take? So that effort is underway. And as you know, your budget approved for fiscal year 14 did include some money for those physical improvements associated with that. So we feel as if once that review is done, we can readily implement those changes.
Did you mention the reward?
Yes,
Okay.
$1,000 reward.
Okay. So hopefully that will, if anybody's listening or thinking, hopefully that will get back to us on whether we had any leads so far as a result of that offer of reward. But I hope that maybe the union and the management maybe partner to increase the reward to help out on this one. So good.
Very good.
Right. Keep going.
So, last Friday, we did receive the long-awaited ruling on last summer's arbitration award. All in all, I think it was good news for TriMet and its writers. Their employment relations certainly had a split decision. There's some things in there that were beneficial to the ATU case and some that were quite beneficial to us. What we most appreciated about it was that the ongoing costs, continuing expense part of the arbitration was sustained in TriMet's favor, so that was very advantageous for us. I wanted to bring Randy Stedman up to give you a little bit more of a digest of what we understand about the decision right now. So Randy, could you join us?
Good morning.
Good morning.
As Neil said, last Friday, the IRB issued a decision, and it upheld the contract award issued by arbitrator Gabe with two exceptions. One related to the retroactivity and recoupment portion of the healthcare proposal, and the other actually were related to funds that were not part of arbitrator Gabe's award. They related to the employment, the EAP fund, Employee Assistance Fund, and the REC fund. Which were in our last offer as fund contributions that had self-terminated through the language of the contract. There were counts in the ULP regarding those two funds, but arbitrator Gabe didn't have that as part of his award at all. So again, good news. Most aspects of the award were upheld and upheld as already implemented. As you know, we had implemented all aspects of the contract award except for the retroactive portion of the healthcare proposal. So Dave, I think Dave Oxera is going to talk about the financial implications, but the award basically has none. We had budgeted for that, again, except for those two contributions to the EAP and the REC fund. So procedurally, at this point, either party can file reconsideration petitions with IRB within 14 days of last Friday, and then there's a potential appeal within 60 days to the Court of Appeals. So either of those two venues are open to the parties. I think IRB's overall admonition to the parties is their decision. It would be a good point of inflection to close the books on this and focus forward. But again, those options are available to the parties. So what's this mean, this decision by IRB, what's it mean to employees? One, the union healthcare plan design that was implemented September 1st, 2012 remains in place for union employees. As a result of IRB's decision, TriMet may not seek to recoup the healthcare costs retroactive to the beginning of the 2009 to 2012 contract. But again, that plan design that was implemented September 1st remains in place. We'll begin recalculating the premiums that employees paid. As you recall, there was, for a couple of years, there was an option 1 and option 2 for the union healthcare plan, and one of those options included premium contributions. Our last best offer included a proposal as required by IRB that there be no contribution of premiums for the contract period, and so we'll begin recalculating what employees paid in premiums and refund that. That issue of refundable premiums is also a part of our Court of Appeals case under UP 3910. which you'll recall is the case that said while TriMet has the right to pass on increased insurance costs once a contract expires, it did so in that case impermissibly, and the make-whole remedy was to refund the premium. So both the award of the contract and UP 3910 have essentially, in that respect, the same remedy, pay back the premiums. The Court of Appeals yesterday issued a partial stay in our appeal, partial stay of IRB's order, so that it gives the parties additional time while 3910 is still pending before we refund the premiums. However, we have a mediation in mid-August, and once we implement IRB's order, I'm not sure that there's anything left of 3910 appeal. So I think that I'm hoping that the parties will agree that that issue is moot, and that issue will also be closed, and with the premiums reimbursed to employees that they paid during the contract period. We will pay under IRB's order the $63,000 and $73,000 for the EAP and Rec Trust Fund within 30 days. And those amounts are calculated for 2012 only and reflect the 2008 levels increased each year for both funds by $2,000. IRB did not order us to pay for 2009, 10, and 11 those increased amounts of $2,000 because ATU did not ask for that. And we're also ordered to continue the status quo with regard to those two funds, increasing from here out $2,000 until bargaining responsibilities are commenced or until the parties reach agreement about those funds. And we have made a proposal in our contract proposals that we made to the ATU last November to eliminate those fund contributions. The defined contribution plan that we put in place for new employees effective August 1st, 2012 and after remains in place. The change from September 1 to the following February 1 as the date used to calculate pension amounts using that pension multiplier, that remains in place. The change to the existing COLA in May of each year using a 0 to 7% based on CPI remains in effect, and 90% of that amount for retirements that occur after August 1st, 2012 also remain in effect, as opposed to the 3 to 5% COLA increases that were awarded previously. And then all other aspects of the arbitrator GABA's award that weren't challenged also remain in effect. So in summary, that's what the award says, and happy to answer any questions.
Questions I see from the board here? Yeah, please, Joe.
Just to clarify, Randy, the EAP is not part of the overall health care plan?
It's not. We have
separate from?
We have an EAP plan that would cover our union employees, but there is a separate fund where we transfer funds from TriMet to the ATU for its use EAP matters. So that's a separate fund. Yes.
Okay. In my world, it's different. So I just was checking. Thank you.
Right.
What about the overall financial impact? I know historically we've talked about that and its impact on the TriMet budget. Have we done a calculation yet based on the findings from the IRB board?
Well, again, except for the two fund contributions, this is the outcome that we expected. So we budgeted that accordingly, and Dave's going to talk more specifically about that.
Excellent.
All right, thank you.
So just in response to Board Member Stovall's question, I'd like to call up Dave, who will give you the quarterly financial reports. And again, there was a little bit of adjustment associated with the ERB ruling associated with those. So Dave?
Yes, good morning. I did want to point out that we have updated financial statements that were at your table that fully reflect the outcome of the IRB decision. So the way you can tell the updated financials from the ones you received earlier by email, is there's some bolded language on page 2 that just mentions that we've updated the financials with the ERB decision. As Randy mentioned, really the financial impacts now are fully reflected in these June 30 financials, and the key components of the decision were the $3.6 million that we need to refund to ATU members for premiums they paid prior to September 2012. If you'll recall, back in April, when we did a budget transfer resolution, we included that $3.6 million. So that was already fully reflected as a liability in our financials, and the money had been transferred from contingency in April to deal with it. The other part of the decision relating to us not being able to recoup the higher premium costs from employees prior to September of 2012 had never been recorded as receivable in our books. So no adjustment was necessary related to that component as well. But we have now, as Randy mentioned, accrued a liability in these financial statements for the contribution to the two funds for the total of $136,000. So all those, the impact of the ERB decision are now fully reflected in these financials. I would point out, again, although we're at year-end, these are unaudited financials, and certain adjustments will still have to be made. There's a couple that we're aware of, and we're waiting for external information or actuarial valuations to make final adjustments. Staff has made its best estimates, so we think these were accurate, and we don't expect material adjustments to come out of these things. But the areas that will change from these financials somewhat, and it really could go either way, be beneficial or smaller. Impact could be both positive or negative, but it's the sick leave liability where we're waiting for an actuarial valuation, and for our non-union defined benefit pension plan. The union defined benefit pension plan actuarial information is already fully reflected here. So those will be small adjustments that will be coming. And then the other one that I should mention is GASB requires us to accrue payroll tax revenues in the period that the wages are paid, not in the period that the employer has to pay the tax. So there's always then kind of this big adjustment, because at year end we have to reflect an estimate for wages paid that quarter that we really don't know what the results will be till roughly middle of August. So some adjustment may come related to that. And those will be made, that final adjustment's made just before Moss Adams signs off on the financial statements. But again, it should not be material. I do think fiscal year-end results are important. Really looking forward, if you think about how we budget for FY14, we kind of take our estimate in two key revenue categories. We take an estimate of where we think FY13 will be, and then multiply it times a growth factor. So this is how we basically budget for payroll tax and self-employment revenues and passenger revenues, which account for roughly 80% of our total operating revenues. So what we want to do with the year-end results is compare to our FY14 budget assumption about where we would end 13 to know if our growth assumption it establishes the base for our FY14 budget. So looking at the payroll tax and self-employment, our FY14 budget assumed we'd end 13 with $256.4 million. Our actual results were $255.5, so we were just $900,000 off, or 0.4%. So again, very, very close. To get the same result now for FY14, instead of a 6.9% growth rate, would need a 7.2% growth rate to get to the same result. And I should point out, with payroll tax and self-employment, that includes the impact from the rate increase. So we don't need underlying growth to be that high. On passenger revenue, the FY14 budget assumed would end 13 at 113.4 million. The actual was 112.5. So again, exactly $900,000 off. This case about 0.8% lower than we had estimated. The growth rate would have to change from 5.6 to 6.4. We think those are very achievable adjustments, and none of the impact from this would or cause us to have to make any changes to our FY14 expenditure assumptions. Our third largest operating resource, operating grants, actually came in $5 million over our estimate for FY13, but those are kind of one-time only in nature and really don't change at all our assumption or impact FY14. But they're positive results that do add to fund balance. So that was a positive outcome. And looking at the expense side, just looking at total expenses in aggregate, we had estimated that we would be at $424.5 million, and actuals came in at $425.7. So we're $1.2 million or 0.3% over our estimate. Again, very, very close. This does not create a budget difference because our estimate was actually about 2% under budget, the budget. So just to know how we're doing against all our assumptions that we're driving the FY14 budget came out very, very close. And so we feel good about the FY14 assumptions. The only other thing I'd mention related to the year-end financials is on the balance sheet, which is on page 10, the unrestricted cash and investments has decreased from $143 million to $90 million, a $54 million decrease, which obviously is something that jumps out at people when you look at the balance sheet. There really are some very, also in the balance sheet, you'll notice that there's a $41 million reduction in accrued pension obligations, the current portion of accrued pension obligations. The reason, and these really offset each other, with pensions, historically, since 1986, actually TriMet's paid pensions up, our pension obligation up to 14 months in arrears of when those benefits are earned. And beginning in FY13, we caught up and now are paying pension obligations in the month they're incurred, so we no longer have a current pension liability. We have an unfunded long-term liability, but we're current as to what's contractually required to pay in the next year. There are two other elements impacting cash that I'll just mention is we also called $7 million of senior lien bonds in FY13. That impacts cash and just actually reduces a long-term liability. And then also unrestricted accounts payable is significantly lower as well. And so we've paid off more bills. One other thing on the balance sheet, you'll notice there's a significant increase in long-term debt and restricted cash and investments, and that just has to do with the interim financing bonds that were issued for the Portland-Milwaukee Light Rail project during FY13. With that, I'll happy to answer questions.
So Director Stovall, were your questions about the contract answered?
Yes, they were.
All right.
They were. I have a couple other questions.
Okay, well,
Just primarily specific on the balance sheet. Okay. You mentioned the unrestricted cash balance reduction. Was maybe I missed the reason why? I mean, I see a large increase in the grants receivable. I don't know if those two are connected, but
No, they're not. The grant receivable will, once we received our federal I'll answer that part of the question first. We actually received our FY13 federal appropriation of $94.5 million from FTA for the Portland Milwaukee grant on the first business day of July. I can't remember now if that was July 1st.
got it.
But, so we just missed being able to record it as cash,
Mhm.
but that would become restricted cash because
Mhm.
it's only available to the Portland Milwaukee project. So the change in unrestricted cash primarily has to do with really the changing in the timing of when our pension payments are being made. So we're now
Got it.
paying them on a current basis in the month they're earned.
Which then is directly connected to because my other question was the accrued pension obligation going from 40 million down to 3,000. I understand your comment in regards to how that plays, how we are current on our current obligation per se, based on this. So those actual accounts are directly linked to each other, because you can clearly see that 40 million basically just moves to which line item, based on cash or based on a liability.
Exactly.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, other questions? Anything down there? All righty, thank you very much. Appreciate it, David.
So, Mr. Board President, if I could continue on a couple other items.
Please.
Sorry, this is a little bit of a long report, but I think we reward you with a relatively short business agenda, so maybe we'll make up for it. At our briefing 2 weeks ago, we actually talked about frequent service restoration. And I just wanted to bring that topic up again, because I think the news of the ERB affirming key portions of our arbitration award from last summer, together with the reasonable contract offer that we have on the table, which I think continues some of those common sense reforms. Our financial results, as you hear from Dave, are falling in line with our expectations. That includes the payroll tax and the fair revenue, our largest items. And we're holding and keeping steady related to the operations expense, which is, I think, a really important part of that, and actually finished the year a little bit under the budget level, which is where we want to be, of course. All of this together, to me, defines an era of sort of financial stability for once, which is a very good place to be. As you know, we don't yet have the capacity to restore all that frequent service all at once, but I do want to thank you for your positive comments at the board briefing 2 weeks ago, and I do want to come back to you in conjunction with some of the work that's going on with the strategic financial plan, with a plan that would begin to invest in the restoration of frequent service over the next few years in a very deliberate way, and then begin to mold our plans and our objectives, our budget actions, to be able to support that over a period of time. So I'm looking forward to our continued conversations on that, but just wanted to sort of hear from the board as you continue your deliberations on this topic about how that priority stacks up. But what I was hearing was that was a pretty important priority for the board of directors.
I think you heard that pretty loudly and clearly
Yeah.
from this board. Yes.
I also wanted to just give you a brief update on the transfer policy issue. As you know, we have brought forward the change in the transfer policy from Opal, and we've met twice with TriMet staff, and Opal have met twice since the last board meeting. I think the parties would still describe it as really in the information gathering and analysis and discovery stage, if you will. I think all would say discussions have been positive, open, and frank, and we really do appreciate that dialogue with Opal. I think the people involved have uniformly described those conversations as quite positive. So we have another meeting with Opal scheduled for July 29th, and we'll continue to update the board on where we are with those conversations and discussions. But also, it obviously comes back to the budget at the end of the day in terms of where is the smartest place to invest, and that will obviously come to you. Also, we just wanted to note that yesterday, the first 6 of our 70 new buses are in service. The new buses are part of our fleet renewal and our increased pace of fleet renewal that was reflected in the past budgets, and again, once again, in the fiscal year 14 budget. They are more fuel efficient, and they include operator and rider improvements from learning, as we always do, from the last batch and making some tweaks associated with that. The buses will be distributed between Merlot and Center Street. We should have them all here by the end of September, I understand. Very similar from a passenger standpoint from the last series of 3,000 buses. These are the 3100s. The passenger seat, I think, as I mentioned before, is a little bit different out of some different materials, so we're experimenting a little bit with that. We've also made some improvements to the ramp for mobility devices. We had some initial issues here, and I know Dr. Bella heard some of those issues at the CAT meetings. So there are new ramp warning lights and improvements for onboard cameras and changes to signage as well. So again, small tweaks that I think will make it even more effective product for our customers and our operators. Regarding the operators, we actually have made some enhancements to the seat and have worked with the operators on sort of making sure that we have the right choices associated with the seat product itself. So we're very excited about beginning to see these new buses out there and beginning to see this renewed fleet on a more regular basis throughout the region. I wanted to transition here, if I could, to note that we have a change in leadership of the Transit Police Division. I first want to call up Assistant Chief Michael Krebs. And you'll note that I'm addressing him as Assistant Chief, not Commander. So he has served as the commander of the Transit Police Division for 4 years, and that's just the last generation, I think. He's been promoted to Assistant Chief of Services, where he'll oversee the training division, personnel, sorry about that, Mike, and a number of other key divisions for the Portland Police Bureau. Needless to say, during his tenure, he helped us expand the TBD through Department of Homeland Security grants, increased the number of officers to 62, provided a chance to begin to patrol the system differently and more effectively. I also would give Commander Krebs great marks for increasing the relationship between the Transit Police Division and other jurisdictional partners, police partners throughout the region, and those partnerships have been very close. And an example of that is the Transit Police missions, including Operations Bus Safe and Operations Rail Safe, that we conduct with our partners. He's also created a unit within the division that targets personal safety issues, and I think that's had big effect. Needless to say, I think he's a true professional who cares deeply about our community. It's been a great honor to work with him. I know he's going to be missed in the Transit Police Division, but we know we have a friend in the Chief's office now, and that's a very good thing. So I wanted to present Assistant Chief Krebs with this little token of our appreciation for his service. You'll be missed, but congratulations on your new duties.
Very nice, thank you. I just want to say thank you. I've been a police officer for over 30 years, and I've thoroughly enjoyed my time here at Transit Police. And you have a fine organization. When I first got here, I worked under Shelley Lomax. A lot of support, a lot of taking your crime and issues on transit security-wise very, very seriously. And that was then turned over to Harry Saporta. And Harry has carried on with Shelley's desire to keep this system safe. And I think that the system's in good hands with Harry Saporta and now the new commander, Kevin Modica. So I feel good. I have mixed emotions. I feel good that I can leave with the system and the security in good hands. But I'm going to actually really, really miss this place. I've been doing my new job for 2 weeks, and whew, I kind of want to come back, but I won't. But I have 9 years left of the Portland Police Bureau, so I'm an at-will employee with my new assistant chief job, so who knows, 5-6 years from now I can come back as a transit commander, so you just never know, stuff happens. So, well, thank you, folks. I just thank you for the opportunity, and like you say, you have a friend in the chief's office, and actually Neil gave me an assignment yesterday. I was at a meeting, and he gave me an assignment for this, for the safety and the homeless camps and stuff like that. So I'll be working on that. So I'm not totally out of transit yet. So thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to have this opportunity to introduce you to Commander Kevin Modica and ask Kevin to come up if he could. He started his new role with us on July 15th. He's, I think, a great addition to our staff. Kevin Modica was promoted from captain, where he was assigned to the Family Services Division. I'll go through a little bit of this. Hope I get it sort of right anyway. He's a 31-year law enforcement veteran, 27 with the Portland Police Bureau. Prior to joining the Bureau, the commander spent 4 years as deputy with the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office. Commander Modica previously served in the Youth Services Division, the Tactical Operations Division, Gang Enforcement, the Portland Office of Emergency Management with detectives, and with the Gang Resistance Education and Training Program, otherwise known as GREAT, where he actually sits on the National Policy Board. So thank you, Commander, for accepting the duties. We're looking forward to working with you. And if you'd like to say a few words to the board, I'd appreciate it.
Well, the first thing is good morning, and I really appreciate the opportunity. I don't know if I'll be able to live up to the standards of Assistant Chief Krebs, but I will say that Mike and I are very close, and our transitionary time has been important to me, and I found it very refreshing to work with your staff people, Harry Supporta and Shelley Lomax, and your public information folks, and I'm looking forward to it. Most of my time in the Bureau, I've endeavored to work closely with the community and be collaborative, and I intend to do the same. And really, I'm just a steward of this great transit policing division that's made up of over 17 other agencies. So I don't do this alone, and I take it very seriously and appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Welcome aboard. We look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commander. Finally, I wanted to introduce Harry Supporta to do your monthly safety update. So, Harry, I might also note as Harry comes up, we've also provided to you the annual report that's required under the statute, finances and administrative activities of the agency. It's a relatively thick document, but I think it's actually a nice recap of the things that the agency accomplished in the last year. So just to note that you should have that, meeting one of the requirements of the statute, to have that to you within 30 days of the end of the fiscal year. With that, Harry?
Sure. Good morning.
Good morning.
I won't go through the report itself, but after you've had an opportunity to review it, I'd be pleased to answer any questions that you might have. The safety update is really, I want to bring a perspective of where we're moving and what we're moving toward. And obviously, this is not the last conversation we're going to have. I'll be before you on a monthly basis to provide various updates. There are three principal goals that that we're working toward, and that first one is using really a risk-based approach as to how we look at safety. And the reason for that is that it allows us to evaluate the most significant hazards, and we're looking at that in terms of both the probability of the hazard event and what would be the severity. And we're looking at that throughout the whole all of our activities and operations. That also then allows us to allocate the appropriate resources to control these. So we're looking at a four-pronged approach to this. One, identify what the hazards are, what are the significance of them, assessing it in terms of probability and severity, and then implementing control measures, then obviously monitoring the control measures to ensure that they remain effective, or do we need to modify them? The second goal is really advancing the culture of safety at TriMet. And if you recall, last year we engaged Washington State University to conduct a safety climate study on our behalf. And there were some significant findings, but one that really stands out is that we really need to do a much better job in soliciting feedback from our employees, and then secondly, communicating safety risk to our employees as well. And so we're working towards doing that. And we're doing that through encouraging employee participation and feedback, primarily through safety committees, but we have other mechanisms, and that's to promote the safety risk assessment process, or safety assessment process, better known as the RSA process. And that's a mechanism that allows us to receive direct feedback from our employees as to what are the safety concerns. And then supporting the recommendations made by our various safety committees. So we're working towards that. I alluded to the third goal is that of safety risk communication. And this is where we are enhancing our safety efforts through training and also finding better ways to communicate with our workforce as to what specifically are those safety risks and how they can help us minimize those risks to the agency and to our customers. Related to that as well is that to contractors that work on our system. They are making various improvements. PMLR is one of those major projects where there's safety risk, not only to the employees that are working on the project, but also to the public. So we're emphasizing contractor safety as well. And then obviously we have a very large outreach to our customers, and you saw an example of that during our last board meeting where we had a flyer, and that was published in all of the community newspapers, emphasizing the importance of safety around our rail lines. So if you look at your packet, and this, I'm on, I guess it would be slide number 5. There's a diagram of something known as a safety management system. This is the approach that we're taking at TriMet to enhance our safety efforts. What you may not know is that the Federal Transit Administration is also adopting this particular approach, just as other U.S. DOT modes of transportation have as well. And most recently, I learned that the federal OSHA is also moving towards a SMS approach. So this is the approach that TriMet is adopting. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that there's this 4-pronged approach, but I wanted to emphasize these 3 primary areas. One is the risk management, and I spoke of that as one of our safety goals, where we're looking at safety hazards, analyzing them, assessing them, and providing mitigation strategies. Secondly is a safety assurance process, which where we begin to collect safety data, analyze it. We're also conducting a series of safety audits and reviews to ensure that our processes remain effective. And unfortunately, we will have incidents on occasion, and we'll investigate those to find the causal factors and are there measures that we can implement to mitigate them. And then obviously establishing a set of performance metrics. And these metrics are not just looking at what has our incident history been, but rather also looking at measuring performance and being proactive in advancing safety through the organization. And lastly, safety promotion through safety training and risk communication. And the benefit of all of this is that then this whole process becomes how we do business at TriMet. Safety then becomes integrated into all aspects of operations with the aim of continuous improvement, which ultimately leads to a culture of safety. So one of the major efforts in this area, if you go to the next slide, is that there was a reorganization of the safety department, where previously there was a single manager that was responsible for managing all safety activities. That effort now has been split among 2 different managers. And the reason for that is so that we can begin to focus on the risk aspects and the safety assurance processes. So that has been implemented, and we're working towards making a number of improvements. So what else have we done this year or in the past year? We've introduced a recertification training program for operators. That's ongoing. We are introducing that risk-based approach, and this is an opportunity for us to communicate to the operators what are the specific risks in operating, whether it's the rail system or the bus system. There's an ongoing effort with our training of supervisors. This last time, we focused on two principal areas: hazard recognition and incident investigation. If we can't recognize the hazards, that's a problem. If we can't learn from our mistakes, that's a problem. So that was where the emphasis